Imagine this, the world wakes up one morning to shocking news. India has declared war on the United States of America. It sounds almost impossible, right? Two of the biggest democracies, two nuclear powers, suddenly fighting each other. But let's put imagination to the test. What would actually happen if India went to war with the US? How would the conflict play out, and what would it mean for the rest of the world? Let's break it down, step by step. Part 1. First reactions. The very first question is, why would India start such a war? Maybe it begins with a border dispute involving an ally. Maybe it's trade tensions that spiral out of control, or maybe it's simply a thought experiment, testing what happens if the world's two largest democracies collide. Whatever the reason, the world would be shocked. Because India and the USA are not enemies today. In fact, they are partners in trade, technology, and defense. Both countries benefit from each other, so the start of a war itself would feel unreal. But let's assume the declaration is real. What happens next? Immediately, global markets would crash, oil prices would shoot up, Asian stock exchanges would fall first, followed by Wall Street. Panic would spread as the world realizes that two nuclear-armed nations are now enemies. Part 2. Military power balance. Now, let's compare the militaries. The United States has the most powerful military in the world, over 1.3 million active troops, and 800 bases spread across more than 70 countries. The US Navy dominates the seas with 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, more than the rest of the world combined. The Air Force has thousands of advanced fighter jets, bombers, and stealth aircraft. And let's not forget nuclear weapons, more than 5,000 warheads. India is no small player either. It has the second largest army in the world with more than 1.4 million active soldiers. A strong navy, including one aircraft carrier and nuclear-powered submarines, a growing air force with modern fighters like Rafale jets, Su-30 MKIs, and a space program capable of satellite warfare. And importantly, about 160 nuclear warheads. So, on paper, the US has more global reach, more technology, and more nukes. But India has size, numbers, geography, and the advantage of fighting close to home. Part 3. Geography and the battlefield. Here's the next big question. Where would this war actually take place? The US and India are on opposite sides of the planet. They don't share a border. That means the US can't just roll tanks across the land. And India can't march troops into California. The war would be fought in three main areas: the Indian Ocean, the skies above South Asia, cyberspace and outer space. The Indian Ocean is India's backyard. More than 80% of the world's oil trade passes through here. If war begins, the US Navy would try to block Indian ports and cut off trade routes. But India would fight back using submarines, coastal defenses, and its own navy. The region would become one of the most dangerous waters on Earth. In the skies, US bombers and drones would try to strike Indian military bases. But India's air defenses are strong. With Russian-made S-400 missile systems and a large fleet of fighters, India would make every US airstrike costly. And then there's cyber and space. Both India and the US have cyber armies capable of shutting down power grids, banks, and communication networks. In space, satellites would be targeted. Without GPS and spy satellites, modern warfare becomes blind. Part 4. The role of allies. Wars are never just between two countries. Allies get pulled in. The US has NATO allies, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. India has growing ties with Russia, Iran, and some Asian neighbors. If NATO joins, the US gets access to European forces and bases around the world. If Russia supports India, it could provide weapons, fuel, and even direct military support. China, watching from the side, would play its own game. If India is busy fighting the US, China might take advantage of the distraction along the Himalayan border. So, very quickly, what began as a two-country war could expand into a global conflict. Part 5. Economic impact. Even before a single shot is fired, the world economy would bleed. India is a hub for IT, medicine, and manufacturing. The US is the backbone of global finance and technology. A war between them would shatter global supply chains. Smartphones, medicines, cars, even food, everything would become more expensive. Millions of Indian workers in the US and millions of families depending on remittances would be trapped. Flights would stop, trade would freeze. Countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Japan, and the UK, heavily dependent on both nations, would be forced to pick sides. It's no exaggeration to say the entire global economy could collapse into a deep recession. Part 6. Conventional battles. Let's say the war goes beyond sanctions and cyber attacks. Real battles begin. At sea, the US Navy has the advantage. Its aircraft carriers can launch strikes from thousands of kilometers away. But in the Indian Ocean, India's navy knows every island, every choke point. With missile batteries along its coasts and nuclear submarines, India could make the US pay a heavy price to enter its waters. On land, India's army is huge. But remember, the US has no land border with India, so unless American troops land in South Asia, large land battles are unlikely. Instead, India's army would focus on defending its borders from opportunistic attacks by China or Pakistan. In the air, the US has advanced stealth bombers like the B-2 and F-35 fighters. But distance matters. For the US to strike India, it needs bases in the Middle East, Africa, or Pacific. If those countries deny access, American planes would struggle. India, meanwhile, can operate directly from its home bases. So, even if the US is stronger, geography makes this war very difficult for Washington. Part 7 Nuclear Nightmare, but here's the darkest possibility: nuclear weapons. If India feels cornered, it could use tactical nukes against US fleets in the Indian Ocean. If the US feels threatened, it could launch long-range missiles at Indian cities. The result? Catastrophe. Even a limited nuclear exchange could kill millions instantly, trigger radiation fallout, and create a nuclear winter. Crops would fail, skies would darken, and billions could starve. This is why most experts agree: a full nuclear war is unwinnable. Both sides lose, and the entire planet suffers. Part 8. The most likely outcome. So, realistically, what happens if India starts a war with the US? The US would respond with overwhelming force, but India would not collapse easily. Geography protects India. Fighting a war 13,000 kilometers away is a nightmare for the US. Both sides would bleed economically. The world economy would sink. Allies would be forced to take sides, pulling the entire world toward World War III. And if nukes are used, humanity itself could be pushed to the edge. So, the most likely outcome? The war never reaches a clear military victory. Instead, after days or weeks of fighting, international pressure forces both sides to stop. A ceasefire is declared. Negotiations begin. And the world breathes a sigh of relief, realizing just how close we came to global disaster. Closing. At the end of the day, wars like this are better left in imagination. India and the US may have disagreements, but they also share values: democracy, freedom, trade, and innovation. Both nations gain more as partners than as enemies. Because if India and the US truly went to war, nobody would win. Not India, not America, not even the rest of the world. Everyone would lose.